Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're embarking on a fascinating little mystery. It might just resonate deeply if you've ever gotten your hands dirty in the garden, especially if you've grown zinnias. You know they can be both a total joy and sometimes a real puzzle. Our source material for this dive is incredibly fresh. Some recent notes from a really dedicated gardening enthusiast published just this September 11th, 2025. The title is Notes on Gardening, Part 646. Is this Alternaria Blight a fungal disease with Zinna plant? So our mission today: unpack the classic symptoms of the Zinnia issue, try to identify the likely culprit, with some precision, explore some surprisingly accessible solutions, and then there's a really unexpected twist in this gardener's own journey. It's a cool story about plant health, problem solving, and serendipity.
Yeah, what's truly compelling here, I think, is how directly applicable these very specific observations are. It really turns what could just be a frustrating moment in the garden into a significant learning opportunity. By digging into a specific plant issue like this, we're not just finding a fix for one zinnia, we're actually gaining broader insights into, say, plant pathology, microclimates, and building a more universal toolkit for keeping plants healthy across your whole garden. It's about moving beyond just, reacting to a problem and really understanding the why behind it.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Our source details a very common and honestly pretty disheartening issue for zinnia growers. The gardener describes how their, beautiful zinnia leaves start to shrivel up, turn brown, and eventually get all brittle and dry. It's a progression that can make a once really vibrant plant look, utterly dejected. Have you ever seen this yourself? Maybe your own plants, perhaps even zinnias, suddenly looking a little crispy, and you're wondering what on earth is going wrong. What's really crucial here for diagnosing this are the early visual clues. The article describes this progression quite meticulously. It notes it typically begins with reddish-brown spots that have grayish-white centers. Now, that specific detail, those distinctive spots with their two-tone centers, they're like a botanical fingerprint, a vital piece of evidence. It's about really slowing down and actually observing those subtle changes, right?
hmm And that raises a really important question. How often do we actually take the time to observe these initial sort of subtle signs before a plant problem gets really widespread and severe? Often we only notice when the leaves are already pretty shriveled and brown, when the issue is much more advanced. The detail about those reddish-brown spots with the grayish-white centers is absolutely critical for early detection. I mean, lots of diseases cause yellowing or browning. It just highlights the value of careful observation, which is always the first step in diagnosing any issue, really, whether it's a plant in your garden or, troubleshooting something complex. Catching those early warnings can mean the difference between a minor fix and, losing the whole plant.
Okay, so armed with these specific clues, the shriveling, the browning leaves, and those telltale spots, our gardener, through their diligent research, came to a pretty strong suspicion about the culprit. They believe it's a classic symptom of Alternaria blight. Now, this isn't just any old plant ailment. The gardener specifically identifies it as a fungal disease, but expert, understanding it's fungal, that fundamentally changes how you'd approach treatment, doesn't it? What are the implications of making that distinction, say, between fungal, bacterial, or maybe even a virus?
Yeah, you've hit on a crucial point there. Knowing it's fungal immediately directs your whole treatment strategy. It's key. Fungal diseases, unlike bacterial or viral ones, they often thrive under very specific environmental conditions, usually moisture and warmth, and they respond to a particular class of treatments. Fungicides. If this were, say, a bacterial spot, fungicides would be pretty much useless. You'd be looking at different things, maybe copper-based sprays, a viral infection. Well, often there's no chemical cure at all. It's more about prevention and just removing the infected plants. So that initial diagnosis, confirming it's fungal, that's the gateway to actually doing something effective. And the disease's progression, from those distinct spots to the full leaf, shriveling and wilting, that's incredibly characteristic of Alternaria. It makes those initial reddish-brown spots with grayish-white centers a really vital early warning. If you see those, you're kind of ahead of the game.
Right, right. Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Because the source doesn't just ID the problem, it also zeroes in on the likely environmental factors that help this fungus along. It mentions the warm, wet, and humid conditions of the plant's microclimate. Now, for a home gardener, microclimate might sound a bit technical, maybe. What exactly does that mean for our zinnias, and why is understanding it so incredibly important when you're trying to stop something like Alternaria blight? It kind of sounds like something you can't control, the weather and all, but I suspect that's not quite right.
You're absolutely right to question that. Because while, we can't change the regional weather, we actually have significant control over our plant's microclimate. A plant's microclimate just refers to the very local conditions right around it, like the humidity level right there between the leaves, the temperature of the soil right at the base, the airflow it gets, even how much sun hits one particular leaf versus another. And this insight is powerful because it tells us that even small, really localized adjustments in your garden can have a big impact on plant health. For Alternaria, which loves that warm, wet, humid environment, managing the microclimate means simple things, really, like ensuring proper plant spacing to get more air moving through, or watering at the base of the plant, trying to keep the leaves themselves dry. Even pruning off some lower leaves can help reduce humidity near the soil. These aren't just about making things look neat. They're direct interventions into the conditions that either let fungi flourish or hopefully stop them in their tracks.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So once you've spotted Alternaria blight, you understand its preferred conditions. What's a gardener actually do? Our source mentions natural or organic fungicides. But what's truly fascinating here, and maybe a bit surprising, are the specific recommendations for sprays. They suggest common household items like baking soda, milk, or hydrogen peroxide might actually be effective. These sound almost too simple. Is there real science behind using these pantry staples against a fungal blight?
It is fascinating, isn't it? And it really encourages that critical thinking, like maybe solutions are closer than we think sometimes. Let's break down why they might work. Baking soda, or sodium bicarbonate, it works mainly by changing the pH on the leaf surface. Most fungal spores seem to like a slightly acidic environment, so if you raise the pH, make it more alkaline, the surface just becomes less hospitable, the spores find it harder to germinate and grow, you're disrupting their ideal setup, essentially.
Okay, altering the environment right on the leaf. Got it. What about milk? That one seems even stranger.
Yeah, milk is interesting. It works a bit differently. Some research is still ongoing, but the thinking is that milk has compounds like lactoferrin, maybe some salts, that have mild antimicrobial properties. They can inhibit fungal growth. Plus, when the milk dries on the leaves, it creates this thin, almost suffocating film that can physically prevent fungal spores from establishing themselves.
A film. Huh, okay. And hydrogen peroxide, I use that for cuts sometimes.
Right. It acts as an oxidizer. When it hits fungal cells, it creates these things called free radicals that basically damage and destroy the cell walls. It directly kills the fungus. Now, it's important to say these are generally most effective as like preventative measures or for very early mild infections. They're not usually a silver bullet if the blight is already widespread and severe, but they do offer some surprisingly potent and crucially non-toxic options for early intervention.
That's incredibly helpful, understanding the why behind the what's. So, yeah, not just old wives' tales. There's actual science there. Now, you might think after battling a fungal disease, after all that effort identifying it, treating it a gardener might be ready to, I don't know, throw in the trowel, or at least maybe move on to a less problematic flower. But our source reveals a really interesting change of heart, a kind of unexpected pivot in their gardening journey that I found really compelling. This gardener shares this unexpected detail. Although they hadn't originally planned on focusing on zinnias much in the future, they discovered they had a surplus of seeds. It was almost by chance. It sounds like maybe a forgotten packet or just a bigger harvest than they expected. And because of this happy accident, this sudden abundance of resources, they decided, and I'm quoting here, I might as well continue to propagate this flower species and see how they thrive. It's just a wonderful moment of like horticultural serendipity, right? Turning a potential endpoint into a brand new beginning.
It really is. And it raises a fascinating question, I think, for all of us. How often do unexpected resources like these Zinnia seeds actually alter our plans? Or open up totally new avenues for exploration that we hadn't even considered before? It speaks volumes about adaptability, doesn't it? Not just in gardening, but in problem solving in general. We often set a course, but sometimes, the universe, or maybe just a forgotten stash of seeds, presents an opportunity that just changes our trajectory. Yeah, this anecdote really speaks to the adaptability that's inherent in any learning process and that often serendipitous nature of discovery. It's a powerful testament to the idea that even when you're faced with challenges or you feel like you're heading one way, an abundance of resources, whether that's physical stuff, new info, or just renewed enthusiasm, it can inspire persistence. It can lead you down entirely new, rewarding paths. It's kind of a metaphor for life, found right there in a zinnia patch. Instead of giving up, this gardener found a reason to lean in, to experiment and turn a resolved problem into this continuous exploration.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Whether you're a seasoned gardener fighting new battles every season, or maybe just starting out with your first pot of zinnias. Well, we've delved into the world of Zinnia troubles, learned how to spot Alternaria Blight by those signature reddish-brown spots with the grayish-white centers. We've understood its preference for those warm, wet, humid conditions that microclimate it. And we even got some insight into surprisingly simple but scientifically sound home remedies like baking soda or milk sprays. And maybe most compellingly, we saw how a simple discovery, just extra seeds, can totally pivot a gardener's whole plan. It transformed a potential setback or maybe just a finished task into this continued journey of propagation and discovery. It's a reminder that even in the smallest corners of our lives, there's always room for growth and those unexpected turns. It's not just about the blight, it's about the resilience, right, of both the plants and the gardener.
It really is. This deep dive truly reminds us that even in a small corner of a garden, there are huge lessons to be learned about meticulous observation, about accurate diagnosis, the power of natural solutions, and perhaps most importantly, about adapting and finding new paths when unexpected circumstances or unexpected resources pop up. Makes you think, doesn't it? What small, everyday surplus or unforeseen opportunity in your own life could maybe lead you down an unexpected, fascinating path you hadn't even considered? Perhaps it's not a garden of zinnias, but a hobby, a project, maybe even just a chance encounter that could spark an entirely new direction for you.
That's a wonderful thought to chew on, absolutely, and a great place to leave it for today. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the zinnia mystery and the unexpected twists of gardening. We hope you've enjoyed it and maybe learned a little something new about both plant health and life's surprising turns. Until next time.